Hello, and welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. Each episode, we talk about a particular topic in the life of a professor. We are tenure-track faculty members in the sciences, working at a primarily undergraduate university in California. The purpose of our podcast is reflection, so we bring something we think is working and something we're working on to discuss. Welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. I'm Claire.
And I'm Ruth. And today we're going to talk about taking it one piece at a time. But before we do that, Claire, how was your week?
My week was good. I'm part of this team making a workshop about radical grading, which...
Oh!
So I'm really excited about this because I feel like my grading system is fine. It involves, writing a bunch of feedback on people's things and handing them back with a grade. But I feel like it could be improved. First of all, I don't like grading. Second of all, I feel like, some people read the feedback, but I don't think everybody does. Anyway, I feel like it could be improved both on my end and on the student learning end. So anyway, the workshop, we're going to hear some speakers with all different kinds of grading systems, and I wanted to put out a call to our listeners.
Ooh.
If any of you guys have any unusual approaches to grading that you've tried, let us know. And if we get enough responses, maybe we'll do a listener mail episode about cool alternative grading approaches. So
that's so cool. I didn't know you were going to a workshop because I think you asked me and I was like, I do exactly the same thing that you do. So I think that wouldn't make for a very exciting episode. But that would be cool if we get some other... Yeah, that would be super interesting. So please do let us know.
Yeah. Anything from having students redo exams as groups or like some kind of holistic grading or like, I don't know, these are words that I've heard, contract-based grading, labor-based grading.
I have heard of these and I don't know what they mean at all.
Yeah.
So I'm very excited to hear more. Okay, wonderful.
Contact professorpodcast@gmail.com is the place to let us know.
Brilliant. Okay, yes.
So what about you, Ruth? How has your week been?
So I finally got the COVID. That's what
my
happened.
goodness.
Yeah, after two years, it finally happened. So I just also want to... So I'm a little breathy and weird, so apologies to listeners if I sound creepy with my breathing. But yes, so we got COVID. Me and the two girls caught it, and it was quite the roller coaster.
Mm-hmm.
But also not super terrible, but just not the best time we've ever had either.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think... I was going to do like a public service announcement, if that's okay. But,
yeah.
If anyone is concerned about the potentially catching COVID, buying a $20 oximeter thing is the best purchase you can ever make. It's really, really helpful. Because I didn't anticipate having like the burny lung feeling is really disconcerting, and it can kind of feel like you're about to die. But then the oxygen meter telling you your oxygen is 100% is very reassuring. So
that makes sense.
I had a friend who did end up going to hospital because they felt so distressed, but they were fine. But obviously, when you don't feel well, you don't want to spend hours in the hospital. So I would strongly be a proponent of spending that $20 and getting that. But
that's really good advice. I have not heard that advice, and
and
it seems like a great move.
Right, and it seems like something that's like expensive, but it's about the same like as a thermometer. So highly recommend. And
good to know.
Oh, sorry. Yes, some exciting things about COVID I didn't know. For all of us, the first symptom was being extremely emotional. And I think I actually texted you that I thought my youngest had it because she had a complete meltdown. And I asked her what was wrong. And she said the cat had looked at her smugly. And so she was devastated. And I was like, oh, okay. I think I know what's happening here. I think you have COVID. So, yes.
Oh, man.
Extreme emotions is apparently a thing. That
Those
happens.
smug cats.
Smug cats. She does look a bit smug, to be fair, sometimes. So, yes.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, so... But then again, just to tell people, if you're feeling alarmed about COVID, I think I was really unlucky in my timing that, like, boosters were just happening in the States when I left. And then they hadn't started here because my age group wasn't... They'd only been vaccinated quite recently. So I think it was just a bit of bad luck with timing. And still... Again, not super fun, but not horrific. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you guys are all on the tail end of it, getting better now.
And I guess I kind of just got my booster in a way.
Oh, that's true.
Through catching it, so that's something for sure.
Oh, gosh. So do you have a quote for us today?
I do, and it's actually a quote from my friend, which, yes. So, and just for context, I think it's definitely to do with today's episode and taking things one piece at a time and sort of keeping on task with things. And also, I do think from reading that like anxiety is a big part of COVID. And I don't know if that's just like having an illness that's part of a global pandemic or actually some mechanism of the illness.
Mm-hmm.
But also kind of losing 2 weeks and you're just like, oh my God. And I was sort of freaking out and thinking unhelpful thoughts. And my very wise friend Jodie said, I might tell my brain that although it thinks it's being helpful by thinking this thought, it might need to set it aside for now. And that's really helpful to me sometimes. Like, A, I don't generally recognize that I have control of my own thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And then B, just like I do, this might come as a real shock to you, but I'm actually quite a doomsayer and I'm always thinking very negative things. So, you know, sometimes I'm always like, oh my God, what's going to be? And it's just not helpful. It's not helpful. And I think it's a very old technique I developed at some time thinking it was going to help me prepare for things happening. And it never, ever has. And it only makes me more stressed. So I like this.
I like it too. I like the acknowledgement that your brain is trying to be helpful.
Right.
But in this case, it's mistaken about what's helpful, so we can set aside that thought and just treat it as a non-helpful thing. Let's do something else. That's cool.
Do you know, okay, sorry, this is a side note, but my daughter had this really great book called Hey Warrior, and it's all about your amygdala, which controls, like, can sort of cause anxiety. And it's all about, like, understanding that the amygdala is trying to keep you safe by flipping out all the time, but you can be like, hey, buddy, I got this. We don't need to flip out about this bunny. Everything is okay. And then, you know, but I like that bit at the beginning, I think is helpful, like you said.
Yeah.
Acknowledging that it's not, like, shut up, don't be stupid. It's,
Yeah. Thanks for your help. In this case, that's not what we need, but appreciate it. Yeah.
Perfect.
I like that.
So, Claire, tell me, why are we doing this episode today?
We are doing this episode because it's our 100th episode.
What?
And we got here one piece at a time. I'm surprised that we're already at 100 episodes, but that's what happens when you do something every week, I guess.
But you know what's weird? It simultaneously feels really, really long because it was pre-COVID.
It was pretty good.
You know, and then it also feels really, really short. But it's also,
because most of it happened in COVID.
I know, exactly. But it's so weird. Like, if you had said to me, do you want to make 100 episodes of a podcast? I would have said, no, thanks, absolutely not, because that would be really scary and overwhelming. But it is a real testament to one piece at a time.
Yes. Yeah, I totally agree. We didn't. It would have been a daunting task to set out to make 100 episodes. But yeah, and in fact, our Spotify sent us a little thing about data with our podcast, and one of the pieces of data was how many hours of content we had released this year, and it was like 20-something, and I was like, what? That many hours of content? That's crazy. But one piece at a time, and you get there. So yes. It's good, inspiring for other things that we might do one piece at a time, I feel like.
I almost want to have, like, construct situations where I don't know something is going to be a big project and then, like, do you know what I mean? Trick myself into being like, what? It's 2 years later and we did 100 episodes? So that's maybe what we need to do for me. But
I totally get that. That's kind of my working on, actually.
How to trick ourselves. So tell me, what's working for you with taking things one piece at a time?
So I was thinking of a couple things. One is that a lot of times I have undergraduate research students and they have weekly times that they work. And so I need to make sure that they have stuff for them to do each week. And that helps ensure that the project is moving forward each week. So as long as I'm intentional about which project they're working on and that it is something I want to move forward every week, just the fact that they're scheduled at very particular hours each week ensures that there's something for them to do that and so that makes sure that over the course of the semester, I haven't just dropped that ball. So yeah, just 1 week at a time, we can get through a bunch that way. And then I was also just thinking about semesters in general are kind of one piece at a time. I mean, of course you have to take each piece of the semester one piece at a time, but just doing one semester and then doing another semester, and I was suddenly looking back and I was like, wow, I've taught this class 6 times now. That's kind of a lot of experience with this class. That's cool. And it never just It didn't just happen. It happened one semester, and then the next semester, and then suddenly we were at 6 semesters. So anyway, that's
Can
kind
I
of cool.
ask you a question about what you said about the undergrads? So do you like decide, here is my goal for the semester, and now I'm going to break it into little chunks of however many weeks? Or does it just kind of organically, like, we'll revisit it next week and then here's the next assignment? And do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't know if this is the right thing to do, but what I do is I put each undergrad on a particular project, and then they just move forward through the course of the semester at however fast they can, given the amount of time they're spending on it, you know? And so maybe I have some idea of it would be cool if we could get to this point by the end of the semester, but it does depend on how fast things go. So I'm more thinking of it as like, well, the next step is this, so I need to make sure they have the next step materials or concepts or whatever it is they need to do the next step available to them before they get to the next step. And then we'll see how long the next step takes, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's really illustrative, is that how you say that word, of, you know, what you can get done if you set out to do. And like for me, I think the biggest, okay, I'm going to talk about this in working on, but like the biggest stopping point I have is like, I don't have a big plan, so then I may as well never start, instead of,
Oh, I see.
well, you have to have something each week and then it will build into something. Just, you know, yes. So that's actually
That's really interesting, because simultaneously a big plan can be daunting to have a big plan. But at the same time, I see what you mean, that if you don't have a big plan, you're like, well, what are we even doing? So maybe like a direction.
Yes, instead
don't know.
of, yeah.
I mean, you
no,
can, yeah.
Well, like, okay, get back to our illustration of a thing we did. That was a big project. But, like, we did have a direction. It wasn't
We
like,
did have a direction.
you know, but
were
we
gonna do
weren't
once a
also
week.
like, we're going to do this for 100 episodes.
Yeah.
By the way, this isn't our last episode. I keep making it sound like I'm like, and then
There
we
will
finish
be
it.
101 next
Yes.
week and onward from
Yeah.
there.
But, yeah. Okay, I like that.
Yeah. Okay, so what's working for you?
So for me, I feel like I've used this phrase before, and I want to make sure I'm using it right. Do you know, like, horses have to have those things on when they're in cities?
The blinders.
The blinders, yes. And so that really helps me. I think, like, my biggest problem with my anxiety would be, and it was like this in undergrad, like I would be studying chapter 9, I'd be like, what about chapter 10? I haven't even started chapter 10.
yeah.
Oh my God, chapter 10. And so trying to, like, just keep my head down and focus on the very next step instead of all the way down the road, because that gives me hysteria. So I think, and the thing I'm thinking of in terms of a really big project and breaking it into pieces was moving country, because that was really overwhelming and a lot of moving parts. And so, have I ever told you about the most famous Irishman? Well, he's not the most famous Irishman, but he's the most special Irishman to me is someone called Tom Crean, and he's like a really famous polar explorer. And he was kind of low pro at the time, but he was part of Shackleton's mission. If anybody ever wants to have a side conversation with me about Shackleton, I would love to. It's one of my favourite things to talk about. But I went to see a production years ago where it was someone telling the story of all of these things from his point of view. And he was talking about one time where he had to walk for 12 hours in the snow. And he just kind of put his head down and counted 1, 2, 3, 4 in Irish over and over again.
Over and over.
And for some reason, this has just stuck in my head of like him just saying a hain do 3 car, like over and over and over again, this kind of mantra. But just that idea of keeping your head down, and like if you start thinking about the fact that you're walking for 12 hours in the snow, you're absolutely going to lose your mind. But if you just keep counting to 4 and kind of keep, like, I almost think of it as like a tiny spotlight, just focusing on the next step instead of all the way down the road. And so that, I have not had too much success with it, but I did with this last project, because it was like, today I'm sorting my shoes, and that is what I am doing, and that's what's happening, instead of
Not worrying about coats.
Yes,
We're only worrying about shoes.
exactly. I'm trying to just keep that. And so I kind of want to carry that stuff into work stuff.
That's cool.
If you know what I mean, that kind of. Did anything I said there make sense? I feel like that
Made
was
perfect sense.
I'm like Tom Crean, and then horses, and then like shoes, and so it's all over the place.
You know, it's making me think of, I feel like a lot of things are like a spectrum or like a pendulum or something. Like, depending on where you are is what direction you should go, if this makes sense.
Ooh,
like,
okay.
So I think it's not always a good idea to just look a spotlight right in front of you, because
yes.
you need to have some idea of where you're going. So this explorer who had to walk for 12 hours knew where he was going.
Right.
You knew you were moving to Ireland, all of these things. We knew we were doing an episode a week. But then you focus on the episode a week. You don't focus on forever.
Yes.
But on the other hand, if maybe your tendency is to look too far into the future and it becomes one big task. But if someone else's tendency might be to just focus on the task at hand, maybe someone else needs to remember to turn the spotlight up periodically and see where you're going.
That's a really
So it's kind of like
point.
a balance. Like, where are you going? Okay, now what's the step? Now let me focus on the step. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yes, I love that.
So, I don't know. It's interesting. It seems like so many things are like that, where like something, like you might need to turn one direction and someone else might need to turn another direction and you end up at the same spot, you know?
Well, and it's so funny with like, I feel like I'm noticing a lot in the world now, people prescribing generalities for too many things. Do you know what I mean? And I really like that you're illustrating this point, because I think it's part of a larger thing where people are like, I found this one solution that is the only way that people can do this thing. And like you said, we all have our own thing, and mine is like being like hysterical way down the path instead of, so that's my sort of challenge. And then again, like you said, other people, you can't just be reacting to the next step. So
it's like one piece at a time with a goal in mind, which is maybe implied, but should be stated as well.
Absolutely, yes, definitely.
So
Tom Crean
I'm kind of
walking in circles in the snow.
Yeah,
so yes,
exactly.
Yeah.
So I feel like this whole thing we're talking about is kind of what I'm working on, which is, I'm thinking about research papers, which is a fairly large task that I have trouble doing one piece at a time, and I'm wondering whether I should put in some other strategies to do them one piece at a time. Should I have, like we've talked about this before, it hasn't worked out yet. I'm not sure if it's because I haven't tried it properly or if I need to try it a different way, but should I just have a scheduled recurring time for working on research papers? Or, like what I'm doing right now is I'm taking the sabbatical next year where I'm going to have dedicated chunks of big amounts of time to work on them. So that seems like that will be effective. But I don't know, it seems like a lot to just wait till sabbaticals to submit all my papers. So I'm wondering, how can I apply one piece at a time to a thing that, I don't know, is less episodic, you know? Like episodes a week seems like a very obvious thing. We're working on this episode, then we're working on this episode, and, you know, maybe we're like doing edits on one episode and planning the next episode, but it's just a repeating cycle. Whereas with a paper, you have to think about, well, first, what is the story we're going to tell, and how am I going to make the figures, and how am I going to structure, and it's just like kind of less obvious to me how you do that one piece at a time. You know?
Okay. So it feels like this is really related to what's working for you, because you're just like, well, these students have to work for 3 hours a week, so I have to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's that aspect. That does sound really appealing, that like you're going to set aside the time to work on the paper. I think the biggest thing I would think is like those chunks don't have to be linear, right?
That's
like,
true.
You don't have to go through this certain set. Like working on the paper could be looking up the submission guidelines. You know what I mean? Or like making the figures. Or I mean, I'm saying all this and like literally writing a paper is actually the last thing I ever want to do ever in a million years. So I'm like, just do this, do that, but whatever. Like if it is what you want to do, like does it have to be prescriptive that, okay, well I have to write the next sentence now, or could it be
Yeah, I think you're right.
just kind of
I think you're
place references or...
And I think we've talked about this before too, and I still think this is true. Again, the fact that it hasn't worked for me yet, I don't think necessarily means this isn't a good idea. It's just that I haven't really given it a full bluey shot. And I think the fact is, like, the undergraduates coming in once a week, they're coming in and they're going to expect to have something to do, and I want to give them something to do, and I'm committed to giving them something to do. I'm less committed to maintaining this 3 hours a week to work on this paper. But maybe that's the problem. The actual problem is that I'm not committed to the 3 hours a week to working on the paper.
Why?
So
Why
it's like a decision. Well, because something else comes up like, oh my goodness, I got to be prepared for lab tomorrow, so I need to get these chemicals, and that's more important, and I don't want to stay late. I don't know. So that's, I guess, the question is, am I committed or am I not committed? I need to decide and then be intentional and stick with it, you know? Maybe I'm not. Maybe it's not the thing to do with these 3 hours a week, and that's fine. But I need to decide, you know? I don't know.
Side question. Do you think there's a point in your career where you just know how you write papers? Because I guess I've not had enough papers that I have any feeling for how I write papers. It was just always someone else wanted me to do it. It was a deadline. It was really stressful and awful. You know what I mean? I don't have any sense
I know what you mean.
like, you know, this is how I write my novels. I like sit in this one cafe at this window. Like, I don't have that. But, okay, here's what I'm wondering. Is there a thing where you just like can have these things where you show up and have prescribed time, but you recognize that by the end of the semester, that's completely pointless and leave yourself alone for the last few weeks of the semester? Or decide, I'm only going to do this for the first 8 weeks of the semester.
And see if it's effective.
Right, or just like, yeah, once I'm in a certain waiting depth of the semester, everything is too stressful and chaotic. And so
Okay, I see what you're saying.
I'll let myself off the hook. Do you know what I mean? Or, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I maybe I would kind of see it as like a trial period. Like, is this effective? If it is, then maybe it becomes a higher priority, and, you know, it could still be booted off if some emergency came up. But the question is, how important is this? And so I'd be testing it and seeing if it is effective. So I don't know. That's a good idea.
Do you have like currently certain projects that are at a point where you could be writing them up? Is that?
Yes, exactly. Okay. But I do have my sabbatical plan to do a bunch of that. But yeah, and as to your question,
is that just practical? Do you know what I mean? Because is there? Okay, again, this is just a bigger writing papers question. But is there like a submersion that needs to happen? Do you know what I mean? Like,
it does seem like you need some kind, and so that's why, like, it seems to me like I would need the repeating chunks of time to be relatively close together so that I haven't totally forgotten what I'm working on. You know, it should be the background thing that I'm working on, I think. But I also think you're talking about how do you go about writing a paper. I think I've really struggled with papers in the past where I don't know what the story is, but I feel like I need to publish this data, and so I need to find a story, and that's a struggle. But if I know what the story is, I think it comes together much easier. Yeah. And so I'm hoping that the direction I've taken my research now is a little bit more, I'm trying to address this particular hypothesis, and so hopefully the data that we have will either support it or not support it, and then that's the story, you know, as opposed to being a little more open-ended. So I'm hoping, and I feel right now more excited about that type of work because it's a little bit more, here's the story. So I feel a little bit more, you know, I don't know. I feel like I could do it in pieces and get it done because I have a better idea of where I'm going, I guess.
Here's what I'm wondering, right? You know, when you prescribe things for yourself, like, does there have to be an acknowledgement? Okay, so I'm a bit all over sorry. Can you tell my COVID brain is still doing this thing? I guess, okay, one thing that I'm thinking is you're really good at writing grants. Like, you're really good at writing grants. And it feels like a grant is very similar to a paper.
It
is. You
know
what I mean? And so what kind of lessons can come from that you could carry over? And then the other thing is, do we just have to acknowledge with these things that there is, like, creative work, which is really hard to prescribe and schedule.
It is.
And then there's the other work that maybe is a little easier to schedule. So, like, could you, if you didn't want to wait, just wait until the sabbatical, could you have the time periods be, I will do practical tasks to do with this paper, such as gather my references, open that document, like, put the sections in, make the figures, like, whatever things you can do to set yourself up for success in the sabbatical rather than sort of creative magic on command.
I love that. I really like that you're noticing that there are different parts to the paper, and some of them are creative and some of them are things that you could just say, in this hour I'm going to make this figure, you know? That's really cool. I think that's a really good point. And so maybe the creative ones, I would think, would be more likely to succeed if I had a big chunk of time, which could just be, I set aside 4 hours on Friday afternoon. Maybe that would be enough to make some progress with that. But certainly I could schedule in the more, I don't know, just put the things in a row kind of tasks. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
And I totally am planning on getting a head start on papers next semester to cruise nicely into the sabbatical of paper writing.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Anyway, lots of thoughts. But what are you working on with
That's so,
one piece
yeah.
at a time?
Jeez, well, I'm having like paper anxiety because I also have paper. I need to do
Oh,
that.
no. Sorry. to
No,
bring
no,
up the
it's
topic.
no, it's like totally. And I'm like, Claire, just do this, and then I'm like, oh, my paper, no. And I've actually already submitted it and gotten feedback that was like really helpful, constructive feedback, and I still can't bring myself to do it. So anyway,
Oh, I totally know. It's
that's the
fine.
thing.
You'll,
So the
you'll
thing
do it.
Yeah, hopefully. But the thing I'm working on is getting started, and this is always I like really like being in the planning stage of things, and I just like okay. So I don't know if this is actually a physics chemistry thing, but every time I've worked in a research group where there's a chemist, they're just so like okay, and let's go, and I'm like, whoa, hang on, let's spend another few weeks talking about how we might start this, and like I don't know. Okay, that just might be me and these people. I don't know, but like it does feel like I just get trapped in the, you
In the
know,
planning.
yeah, and I get like, you know, that phrase like the perfect be the enemy of the good. So I'm like, I need to make a perfect plan, and then and like I did the same thing with every semester when I teach, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna like maybe I'll map it all out. Maybe this will be the year I'll have everything, and then it always ends up like the semester happens one piece at a time and one lecture at a time, and I don't have some great master rubric for like the lecture, you know what I mean, like it all just happens and it always works out that way, but I just get so stuck in the idea that this time like it might be perfect if I can just hit on the right thing
Interesting.
instead of just getting on with it, and you just press record your lectures, and then slowly but surely, like I kind of had a bit of a moment at the end of the first semester where we taught fully online, where I think I ended up with 60 something lectures, and I was like, what, how on earth, you know, did that happen?
Yeah.
But of course it just happened one piece at a time, and you know, that was in some ways COVID, like that period was good for me because I was so time poor. I just had to like steal moments and just record a lecture and get on with it. And
you had to hit record because you only had
Right.
however much time. Yeah.
totally. And like now I'm preparing for something next semester, and I kind of gotten paralyzed in the, oh my God, but I need to like map it all out. And like, it's just, I don't know why this is like my groove that I get stuck in.
Well, this feels to me like another example of this pendulum thing that I was trying to describe earlier of like planning is good. You
Yes.
wanting to come up with a great plan and like really figure out what you're going to do before you start is great. I feel like I'm on the other side of the spectrum where I just want to start. I'm like, okay, I'm already writing this thing. Like I've already hit record even though I don't know what I'm going to say. I want to get going.
Yeah.
And I feel like we probably should meet somewhere in the middle where we do plan, but then we actually start going. So I don't know. I feel like I wouldn't want to throw out, like, your planning is excellent. And so definitely hold on to that. I don't know. Yeah, I think maybe you need some trick or some ritual for like, okay, we're going to start, and it's okay that it's not going to be perfect. We're just going to start trying it. We need some moment of switching. But I definitely wouldn't get down on yourself about all the planning because it sounds super awesome. And like, I really loved, like, just to take the class analogy you were talking about, like one time recently you were talking about printing out all your quizzes before the semester started for the whole semester. And that just sounds really relaxing to just have them all ready to go, pre-planned, super smooth. So that seems good. So I don't know. There's plenty of positives with the planning that I can see because I'm not doing the
Totally.
planning. So I don't know how this helps with the get going, but I love the planning side that you've got solid.
Well, I think, and sometimes it helps to just remember that, like often though, you can't make necessarily the perfect plan until you kind of get started. Do you know what I
Yes.
mean? And
The plan will have to be revised.
it totally, and I think, like I always talk about that fantasy of like laying down the law, like I'm Snake or something, and having this perfect semester where everyone like obeys my authority and sees whatever. Like, I always get caught up in kind of fantasies like that where things are just always going to come up and go wrong, and there's going to be people who are annoyed, and like,
Yeah.
and I think that is something that I like about when I say getting older, I kind of mean in our jobs, you know, like just that experience of like, you're never going to say the magic sentence that means everyone's suddenly on board,
Right.
or the
Right.
opposite, you know what I mean? So yeah, I think I just need to let go of the fantasy a bit and just,
I think you're right. Let go of the possibility of having the perfect semester or the perfect
Yes,
plan, and be
totally.
excited that you have a pretty good one and you're going to start
Yeah, and a bit of
out.
faith in our own experiential knowledge that like we do figure it out as we go
Right.
along.
That's a great point. You know, you figured it out every single time. So
Right.
you will figure it out this time. So it's okay that you don't have the perfect plan. I mean, it's kind of how semesters keep piling up. Like, I was kind of stressing out about grading this last semester, and Ralph was like, "Have you finished it every other semester?" And
I
I was like,
know.
"Yes." Okay, I guess I
I
probably
want to be
will
like, I
finish
know,
it this
Ralph, but that's
semester
not the
too.
point. This year might be the one year where I
This year
don't.
might be the year that I don't finish it. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So the fact that you have had it work out every single semester.
Well, I think I also don't have a very realistic idea of who I am. Do you know what I mean? Where I'm like, oh, crazy Ruth, she's just going to go stumbling in. And it's like,
No,
I
you
started to reckon, I'm like, my anxiety is in some ways a superpower because I would never in a million years go into something unprepared. Do you know what I mean? And
so you can be
so,
confident that's not going to happen.
yeah.
You know what reminds me? Before my first semester of teaching, I was really nervous. I hadn't made my syllabus yet. It was like a few days out. I was like, I don't even know how to make a syllabus. I don't know what I'm doing. I haven't made my syllabus yet. And I was telling my friend Blaze, who's been a co-host on this show, and he said, well, you know you're going to have it by Monday at 9, so don't stress about it. And I was like, what? That's crazy, but it's true. You are going to have it done. So the question is just, how do you want to? Do you want to do more planning, or do you want to start right now, or what do you want to do? But it will be done, you know?
Yes. I think too, I'm extrapolating a little bit from right now because this is a weird time and I am doing something for the first time. But yeah, sometimes I just need to remember all the times when I did just start and it felt better. Like,
Yeah.
because we were reminiscing about the time when we thought COVID was going to be like 3 weeks or whatever back in the day. But we were like, I was like, I have 2 days and I have to get all these lectures done. And I just did them. And they were fine. Like, they weren't the best recorded lectures in the universe, but they also weren't, you know, they did the job. They were fine.
They were effective. Yeah.
Yeah. And so just need to get on with it.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point that you just mentioned, that the anxiety about not having started goes down as soon as you start. So maybe that can
Yes.
be an incentive for, you know, switching. You're not saying you're never going to come back to the planning stage, but you're just saying, okay, I'm going to start the actual creation
Totally.
stage.
And who knows, maybe we'll end up with another miraculous 100-episode project that we didn't
Right.
even know we were going to do. Well, we did. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah.
One piece at a time.
Yes, one piece at a time. That's how we're rolling. Thanks, Claire.
Thank you, Ruth.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. We're delighted to have you as a listener and we would love to hear from you. And if you want to email us, our address is contactprofessorpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear any of your suggestions for future shows or professor quotes that you might want to share with us, or even just things that have come up for you when you were listening to previous episodes. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, we would love if you would spread the word. So the best way to spread word is by telling people you know if you think they should listen to it, or you can leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.